Spag himself was born on leap year day in 1916. That's the first indication everybody had that he was going to be a little different than everybody else. So how many people do you know that were born on leap year? I don't know anybody else. Within a few years, his parents owned a kind of like a spa up at the top of Belmont Hill called the Sanitarium, I think it was called. Anyway, when he was maybe 8 or 9 years old, he decided to help out the store. He would clean and fill the candy counter, like a glass case. And the story goes once in a while, he would sample a few pieces of candy and give a few to his sisters. Well, a year or two later, he got involved in riding on the trolley, Boston and Worcester trolley, and he would carry like a strap with a box filled with candy and chewing gum, which he would sell to the passengers. And usually, almost every time, by the time he got to the trolley stop in Framingham, all the candy and gum would be gone, so he just got on the trolley coming west and come back to Worcester. A few years later, the family moved to Shrewsbury, up off of Elm Street. His father owned a building on Route 9 that was housing a trucking company. Well, when he was just out of high school, he asked his mother if he could borrow $35. It was right near the 4th of July. And he bought a bunch of fireworks in Worcester, brought them home, and sold them, made $200, which he immediately handed to his mother to help with the bills. Within another year or two, he was working for the Fuller Brush Company, going door to door, selling, Fuller brushes. And he said, they asked him what he wanted to do. He said, well, I like talking and I like selling. So I want to go into business. So he borrowed a little more money from his mother, and they let him have a little corner in the front of the building to open a little hardware store, which was called Shrewsbury Tire and Battery. At that time, it was shortly after Route 9 was built, so there were more automobile traffic going by there. Within a few years, he started getting more and more things that he would sell. Pretty soon, he changed the name to Spag Supply. Within a few years after that, he expanded so much that the trucking company moved out. He took over more of the building, and it just grew and grew and grew. By the time 1939, 1940, he hired his first part-time employee, who was a good friend of my father's, Ernie B. Yankee, who lived right next door pretty much. Before that, his wife would help out. His wife, Olive, that's another story. When they were in high school together, Spag was unique, let's put it that way. She wasn't really attracted to him too much because he wore knickers. When knickers were out of style, he would still wear them. And little by little, they kind of warmed up to each other, I guess. But she became, part of the business there. Anyway, his wife and some of his friends would help out in the store, but he had no employees up to that point. By the time the mid-50s came along, he had hired a bunch of people. The store had expanded so much and was so successful that one day he came home, his parents and his sisters were there, and he said, I have some news for you. And they said, what's that? And they said, he said, I just found out that I became a millionaire. Well, $1 million in 1953 or 4 was a lot more money than it is today. And it just shows you how quickly his business had grown, even during, the war years and so on. He also, he was at the age where he probably could have easily been drafted or gone in the service, but his eyesight was so poor that they rejected him. And they said, the family said that bothered him, it always bothered him. As time went on, he was more successful. The store got bigger and bigger. But Spag and his family were always very, very generous to the town. He appreciated the fact that, his business had grown so much. He knew a lot of local people, that type of thing. And they were very good to the people in the town. Anytime somebody passed away, they would pay for the mercy meal for the family and also donate a book to the library in the deceased person's name. Later on, they bought the first bookmobile for the library. There's a room dedicated to them in the front part of the building. There's two beautiful portraits, one of Spag and his wife. All kinds of things. Anybody that was in need, he would help out. There were people that were down on their luck. Some of you may remember the Blunt family who lived on Lake Michigan. Rocky Blunt was a reporter for the newspaper for many, many years. I knew his sons, I grew up down. Well, I think it was New Year's Eve in 1969, their house burned to the ground. Spag got in touch with them and said, I'm going to put you up at a hotel until you can get back on your feet. So he put the family, the three boys and the parents, up at a hotel until they could get back where they were, stabilized. Over and over, you hear people that he helped. Another person that I know, his grandparents lived close to Spag. They had a fire in their house. Same thing. He said, just come down to the store and get whatever you need. He was that type of guy. Olive, and again, in the book, you'll find a lot of these stories. I was lucky enough in writing the book to speak to one of Spag's daughters. One thing I forgot to mention, another thing that happened that kind of got me going with this, a few years back, one of Spag's daughters passed away. Carol Cohen. And the other daughters knew of my interest in history and so on. So they said, can you come over to her house? She has all the memorabilia from the business. By this time, Spag was closed. And I said, okay. So I went over and they said, you can take whatever photos or whatever you want, but if there's anything you think the Historical Society might like, please get it to them. So that's what we did. But that also generated some interest for me. As far as Olive herself, Spag was kind of the person-to-person part of the store. He would go around the store talking to people or talking to employees. My wife will tell you that it was like a big family there. Nobody ever left that was hired. They all worked there for years and years. In fact, this might be embarrassing, I don't know. When she went to apply for a job there, they said, okay, come in, we'll talk to you, fill out an application. So she did, and they called her back, and she went for an interview. And the person interviewing her was a Spag interviewer. Said, how come your application's on top of this pile and yours is nice and new, and all these other ones are really old? And she says, well, I think it's because my father-in-law grew up with Spag. So there was a town connection, a family connection. But all the employees kind of worked together. She said that he worked in all the departments, right? You know, the cashier in different departments. If you didn't know the price of something, you just yell over to somebody else. They knew the price, that type of thing. Spag was unique in that he would buy large quantities of things. He had a unique sense of what people might want. So he'd go to all these trade shows around the country, order 1,000 of these or 10,000 of those, and then he'd put them in trailers in the parking lot, which served two purposes. You didn't have far to go to get this stuff, plus you didn't pay taxes on trailers like you did on property. So there's so many stories. All of the South was the business end of things. She took care of the office and finances and so on. I mentioned that they would go to trade shows all over the place. So they would fly all over the country. Well, eventually she said, I want to get my pilot's license, so I'll fly us all over the country. So she did. And she got her private pilot's license for a twin-engine propeller type plane. She went on to get her twin-engine jet license, and then they bought a twin-engine Cessna jet, which there's a picture of her with her jet in the book. And she would fly them all over the country. I was lucky enough to talk to Spag's niece, Judy Polito. Now, her father was Judy. She was Judy Lutz. Her father was Bob Lutz, who was Olive's brother, who became the chief financial officer for business. Anyway, she said once around Olive, her son was playing a sports, I think, hockey game up in Canada. So her aunt said, oh, well, I'll fly you up there. So she said the weather was really bad. Her husband, Fran, was sitting in the seat, and he was like scared to death that but she landed them and everything turned out okay. But there was also a story, a rumor that Spag kept a gun under his bed. So I asked her about that. She said, oh my God, no, my aunt would have killed him. So, some of the stories I got from the family, from the employees. I spoke to some of the former managers, people like that. Another person I met, they used to have a huge granite stone. Spag's expanded, as you know, until there were like 5 different parts. The main store, the sports shop, Christmas shop, the schoolhouse, and the garden shop. 5? Anyway, up by the schoolhouse they had this big granite stone that Spag's, I think 30th anniversary was carved into it. When they were taking the building down when the business closed, this guy I met, Mark LeBlanc, had worked there, and he said, oh no, you're not going to throw that away. And they said, well, you can have it if you can move it. So he got his pickup truck and got some of his friends. They managed to get it up into the truck, brought it home, and it's sitting in his garden. And it's well cared for there. Eventually, Olive became ill. She found out she had cancer in I think September of maybe 1990. I don't know. Yeah. And then by December of that year, she passed away. She tried to get her daughters involved in the business as quickly as she could to kind of transfer things over. They carried on for a few more years until Spag himself passed away in 1996. A few years after that, they decided to close the business. It was sold to Building 19, it became Spag's 19. A few more years, and then they decided to close it down. For a short time, it was kind of like an indoor flea market fair. And then the Lakeway Commons bought the property, knocked the buildings down, and so on, and built what's there now. They did restore the Spag sign, and there's a few other Spag mementos inside the Whole Foods building there. So that was a nice thing. But to this day, as I said, Spag's legacy lives on, and people, it's just a nice memory people have of that place. And there's so many stories, it's hard to believe. And it's not just from Shrewsbury, it's not just from Massachusetts, it's from all over New England, all over the country. One of the other managers, Lori Chadarian, said she was in Florida at the airport, and somebody said, "I recognize your voice. You used to work at Spag." And she said, "That's right." No, here's another story. This other friend of mine who has a grown son now. One day he was in Spag, and he would bring his son there, and the son didn't like being there. So next thing you know, in Spag's they had an intercom system. On the intercom, they said, "Could Mr. So-and-so come to the fishing tackle counter? Your son so-and-so is here and would like to talk to you." So the kid ran off, and then he had to get called over together. Another one, very similar story, but he told his son, "Okay, you go over into the toy department, I'm gonna go over here." 2 hours over, next thing you know, he disappeared. He couldn't find him. And he got called over the intercom too. But just an interesting place. There's a lot of interesting stories. The biggest thing is, another story. I'm thinking things as I go along. Spag, of course, always kind of dressed the same way, with his khaki pants and shirt, with 10-gallon hat. Everybody asks, what happened to the hat? Well, he didn't have just one hat. He had lots and lots of hats, and they weren't all 10-gallon hats. There were all kinds of crazy hats. It's just a thing he had. But one day he walked, his wife drove a Cadillac. One day he walked into the Cadillac dealer that was on Shrewsbury Street, and he was looking around, and the salespeople saw this guy with, didn't look like he really belonged there maybe or something, and they kind of ignored him. So he said, "Oh, okay." So he walked out and got in his car and drove down around Boston to a Cadillac dealer. And he walked in, he had looked at the Cadillacs at the dealer. He said, "I want 2 of those." And they said, "You want 2 of those?" He said, "Yeah, I'll pay you cash." They said, "Well, why don't you take one for a ride, see if you like it?" Okay. So he took it for a little ride, came back, handed him the cash, and they immediately called up the dealer in Worcester and said, "Anytime you have a guy that walks in with a cowboy hat and khakis, please send him our way." Another story, he used to, every night after the store closed, he would go down to the store. He, one time, almost got robbed, because back then everything was cash at the store, pretty much. So he bought 2 German Shepherds that he would keep with him all the time at night. In fact, that's them on the cover. So there's 2 parts to the story. One is he had the 2 German Shepherds, and he used to go down there every night after it closed. He'd let them loose in the store to make sure everything was okay, that nobody was still in there or whatever. One night, this guy had decided to kind of rob the store, so he stayed there, he kind of hid until everybody left, and he decided he was going to try some clothes on, so he got undressed and didn't have much on, and all of a sudden these two German shepherds came after him, and here comes Spag, and he said, oh, yeah, I guess you're, here and you shouldn't be, so they called the police and they came and got him. Anyway, he used to drive around in an old broken down station wagon with the two dogs everywhere he went. Well, when I gave the talk at the Sons of Italy, the president of the Sons of Italy, Kevin Mercadanti, who runs Mercadanti Funeral Home, he was just the Grand Marshal of the Italian parade in Worcester. He said, well, he said, you're talking about Spag and so on. He said, you know the old station wagon you used to drive all the time? He said, yeah. He said, well, all those station wagons used to belong to us at the funeral home. We'd use them until they got a couple of years old, and then he would buy them, and he would use them after that. So it just goes on and on. The stories just keep going and going and going. But a really interesting place. It's sad it's gone. A lot of people really wish it was still here, including me. One other story, there's some stories that we're not sure if they're true or not. One of them is that Sam Walton, the founder of Walmart and Sam's Club, before he set out in business, came here and talked to Spag about his business model. And he kind of built his Walmart and so on that same idea. I haven't tracked that one down yet. I talked to his daughter again. I'll ask her about it. Another story I heard, and I don't know if this one's true, they used to have these tubes. All the cashiers had tubes next to the register. Any money they got at a certain point, they put in the tube, and take it up like you have at the bank, like at the credit union. You put the tube in the holder and it sucks it up there with the money. Well, when it was any of the daughters' birthdays, whatever money was earned in the store that day that went up through the tubes, the daughters cut for their birthday present. How many daughters? 3.
Could I introduce Jean Bugatti, Dr. Jean Bugatti, Spag's daughter?
I hope I'm getting things
I
right.
never got money from it.
Okay, so that story is false.
I got lots of birthday presents, but not
Okay.
that one.
And the story about the gun is not true, correct?
I didn't live at home there was a time when I wasn't living at home after I went off to school. I do know that they all took shooting lessons. They went to
Okay.
the shooting range,
Maybe.
because they did have some scares.
How am I doing so far?
Okay.
I'm happy you're here. Let's see, what else? And I also heard this. I won't name any names with this one. You may have never heard this story. I ran into somebody I graduated with and his wife. And he said, oh, we saw you wrote a book about Spag. And he says, my mother-in-law was asked out by Spag. And she said no. I said, oh, I bet you're sorry.
Before or after my mother died.
No, this was before.
Because I can tell you, there were a lot of women who after my mother passed away,
Oh, I see.
who kept the company on the phone in the evening.
No, this was way before that, when they were in school, I think. And she said no. And he said, well, you want to
My
know
mother
why?
too.
Yes, yeah. You want to know why? I said, okay, why? She said, well, she didn't like the fact that he went like that with his arm. I said, well, I guess she maybe should have overlooked that.
Hindsight's 20/20.
So, I could go on forever, I think, in the story. I just keep thinking of things. But it certainly was an interesting place. It's missed by people all over the country, and it sounds like all over the world. Somebody else I know was in Switzerland at some type of conference, and they said, "Where are you from?" And they told me, I said, "Oh, that's where Spag's is. We've been to Spag's." And they weren't from the US, they were from another country, not only Transylvania. But, one other story I'll share, I won't name any names here either, and I'll probably get in trouble for this one too. But when I was a kid, we all used to play baseball. And it was just, neighborhood fields, no leagues or anything like that, just a bunch of kids. And I was probably 10 or 12 years old. And it seems like some of the kids in the neighborhood, every year, all of a sudden would appear with a brand new catcher's mitt, a baseball glove. We didn't have any money, we didn't work. Where did you get that? Oh, we got it at Spag's. Well, after a couple of years, I figured out they were going into Spag's and they would just stick it in their coat. But after a while, I thought about it, and knowing how generous your father was to the town and the families and so on, the feeling I got was he might have known that this was going on, but he figured they were neighborhood kids, and okay, just take the gloves. So, I'm trying to think of anything else I can pass along. Well, why don't we open it up?
How about the tomato plants?
Oh, the tomato plant, yes, that's in the book. We actually tracked down the tomato cost, because if you made one. Okay, we tracked down the cost. The Creedon family, Creedon and Company. John Creedon, who's somebody I knew, and my wife knows, for a while, until the past couple of years, owned the Worcester Bread House. And a few years ago, they had a Spag's reunion of sorts. And not only did they create a Spag's bobblehead, which they were nice enough to give me one, but they have a few Spag's memorabilia items, one of which is a tomato costume.
Yes, I gave them the tomato costume.
You gave it to them, okay. So I said, oh, we need a picture of that, but, I asked my wife to model it, she declined. But John's sister was nice enough, she said, oh, I'll put it on. So there's a picture of her in the book going like this with the tomato costume. They also have this statue, the wooden statue of Spag, that was carved as, you would have various,
And it was by a chainsaw.
a chainsaw artist came to the store and carved out of a log a statue of Spag holding a bag that says BYOB, bring your own bag, with the hat and so on. And John Creedon somehow or another heard that when the building was sold and so on, somebody purchased the statue. It was in, I think, Providence.
It was stolen.
Oh, it was stolen. Oh, all right. It was
And
stolen.
somebody saw it in an antique store down, I thought it was in Connecticut, but.
Okay, maybe it was connected.
And they hightailed it down there and bought it back.
They brought it back. It actually was his kids that bought it. And they didn't tell him. And they brought it back. They were going to give it to him for Christmas, I think. And they put it in the business. And he happened to come along and said, what are you doing? What is that? They said, well, it is your Christmas present. And it's a statue of Spag. One other thing that's a mystery that's very, very unfortunate. When the building was coming down, the addition to the schoolhouse had a beautiful stained glass window.
It's also disappeared.
and he was gonna be preserved, it was all boxed up. And then, poof, it was gone, somebody stole it. And nobody knows where it went. I was lucky enough, just recently, one of my friends, who's now deceased, but his son lived near there, and for some reason, is kind of like a history buff like me. When the store was closing or being torn down, he went and talked to them, and they said, "Oh, just go through, take pictures or whatever you want." So he was nice enough. He's probably maybe 30 or so now, and he sent me pictures, including one of the stained glass window. If you don't have one, I'll be happy to send that along. So there's stories and stories and stories. So why don't we go around the room? Does anybody else have a story or a question? Yes,
I'd like to know how many people in this audience actually traded at Spag's. Raise their hands. Is there anybody who didn't? Oh, wow, nobody's lost. Two.
How many people in the room actually went there shopping?
How many people work at Spag's?
Oh,
Okay.
that's interesting.
I'm new in town. I've only been in town since 2021. But I remember coming from Waltham to go to Spag's once or twice in the early 90s.
Yes,
Do you have any stories of the inventory he would take every year?
the inventory.
He'd get us all up, everyone who worked there would come in at 7 o'clock on a Sunday
Yes,
and
go through the whole
count
store.
everything, every mail, every thing, and then he'd give us lunch, and we'd all be done by 3 o'clock.
The other thing he would do every year, he'd have a party, for the employees, Christmas party, and he would give out very, very generous bonuses. My wife bought a KitchenAid mixer with her bonus one year. That was quite a bit of money back then, and she still has it. It still works. He would also give out pins or chain, little chains for 5 or 10 years service, which she still has. So many people that work there still have their little badges. She still has hers. Yeah, our son worked there for a summer. He was in high school.
I still have my apron.
She has a paper. The other thing that they would do, they would have all these various things. Spag mixing bowls are still all over the place. This is 25 years, 35, 1960. What else? Of course, Spag's Anchor's hat. We're in Market Basket one day, and here came somebody with the Spag's hat. Spag sweatshirt, t-shirt to sell around. Again, being a part of the town. On the 250th anniversary of the town, 1977, Spag's had these plates, these limited edition plates made to celebrate the anniversary of the town. This is number 736.
Do they still have memorabilia for sale?
Well, when you say they,
I don't know, whether anybody.
well, just to show you, we went into an antique shop one day in Holden and mentioned something about Spag. She goes, "Oh, I can't, anything I get that says Spag's on it, immediately somebody buys it. It just goes."
eBay.
On eBay, but the yardsticks say Spag's on them. Everybody around here still has something that has the magic marker price on it that says Spag. or these little orange stickers like on.
Stickers, yeah.
My son asked me for a pair of, he was closing up a swimming pool the other day. He said, do you have any channel locks? And the big pliers like, I said, yeah, I have a pair. So I went and got in, they're kind of old and rusty. I looked down, it said $16.99 in magic marker on the handle from Spag. Another little thing, I don't know why we have that. Maybe to summons the kids when they were little. It's a little bell, like you might ring. And that was, I don't know, $1.25. It's just amazing the things that were sold there. The plumbing supplies were next to the sneakers and everything was all mixed up, but it was unique. And that's what people liked about it.
And it was in order too, everything was in.
Everything was in order, and they knew where everything was.
The reason I brought up the tomato plants, they used to give them away for free. I was just wondering if you had any idea how many thousands you gave away each year.
Lots and lots. It's in the book. I can't remember the exact number, but there were certainly lots and lots of tomato plants that were.
Were they grown local, the tomato plants?
I'm not sure where he got them. I mean, I wasn't a buyer.
The other thing he would do at Christmas time, all the employees would get a fruit basket with oranges and grapefruit that were grown in Florida. He developed a relationship with somebody down there, and they would send tons and tons of that
It
stuff.
was unique. It was unique.
Unique, that's right. That's
I remember the ramp, the ramps on another store.
the ramp.
Yeah.
The business was added on to a number of times. And each time, that part of the building was used for a certain thing. Oh, a couple of other things. Some sales fads, let's call them. The Cabbage Patch Kids, when those were a big thing. She worked there now. You would buy so many of them that the phone would be ringing at all hours of the night, people calling up, asking for them. You said, just come to the store, have them at night, that type of thing. But it got so bad that the employees finally just got up on the display. People were kind of pushing, shoving each other. They just tossed them to the people. Type of thing.
Those are popular.
Yeah. What was the other item there? Something else happened. Okay, somebody else said, yes, sir.
I had an opportunity to eat Spags twice. And the first time was, my dad lived on Phillips Avenue and went to school with Spags.
Okay,
And I was selling Advil and Robitussin and Centrum and Capstan. And he had all these people waiting. He said, Gibson, come on in. So I got to meet him and Olive. And I don't know how much he had to do with helping me, but it was quite an account, and they had chapstick, 4 for $1, every single register.
there you
They
go.
got me in trouble with other accounts. That was pretty much, that was cost.
Yes, yeah.
That was fun. Then another time, our neighbor who does the advertising for Spags, Greg Lano, Greg, he had Spags over, plus Bobby and his kids, and, we had a chance to talk.
Mhm. One other very touching story, I'll tell you, and this is in the book. We were out for a walk one day in the neighborhood, and this couple that we've known for years and years, I grew up with, or graduated with his brother and sister, said, oh, I heard you have a book, you're working on a book about Spag. Well, let me back up. No, that isn't what happened. We mentioned something about Spag. And he said, oh yeah, I remember Spag. And we went home, and that night, the doorbell rang. And I went and answered the door, it was him. He said, well, I got in trouble when I got home. He said, well, I went in and I told my wife that I'm talking to you, and writing a book about Spag. She said, well, did you tell him the story? He said, no, I forgot. So she made me come over here to tell you. I said, well, what's the story? He said, well, when our kids were young, their boys are a little bit older than us, so this is probably 40 years ago. They still believed in Santa. So Christmas Eve, they had gone next door, her in-laws lived next door, they went next door for Christmas Eve dinner, came home, and about 10 o'clock at night, the boys finally went to sleep, and they bought 2 big wheels. Remember the big wheels all the kids had? Right around on. They each were gonna get a big wheel. So he opened one box, he built the big wheel. He opened the second box, and all the nuts and bolts that came in a little bag were missing. So again, 10 o'clock or so on Christmas Eve, his wife said, well, call Spag. So she called the number and she got her mother. And she said, come down to the store right now. So we live close by. He drove up to the store, said, come with me. She brought him in, he grabbed a big wheel box off the shelf, ripped it open, took the bag of nuts and bolts out, said, have a Merry Christmas. And the kids were happy the next day. Any other, yes?
Anybody go to see Bobby Orr when he signed the hockey sticks there?
No, we went to see Kevin McHale.
Yeah,
Used to have the sports people come.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
you know,
Bobby Orr.
people,
Yeah, and there was one, yeah. The hockey sticks flew out of there that night.
It would
Yeah.
have, but now.
I've got a couple stories. One is when Spag was going to New York for some of those trade shows, he'd give the toll takers apples. He had a big bag of apples and dispensed it along the way.
Okay.
They're kind of fascinating. The other thing is, usually right after Thanksgiving, there'd be these great big buses from New York. I mean, they were busing people up here, and they'd all
Yes.
run in and do their Christmas shopping and come running out, and off they go.
yeah.
I thought that was just pretty weird that these people come from miles and miles away.
Lori Jodierian mentioned something about that. She was one of the managers, and she said they would announce over the intercom when the buses would come from all over the place, and they would have a certain amount of time to shop. But they would announce over the intercom, okay, the bus for so-and-so is gonna be leaving, so anybody that's in here shopping, you have to get going, that type of thing. Yeah,
The other thing I heard, and I assume it's true, that said the Lionel train rep for the region used to park himself at Spag's because Spag sold so many Lionel trains that this guy was on staff.
I certainly don't know everything. Another person that was a big part of Spags, still here in town, Mr. Dobson, Arthur Dobson, who started off,
Chuck E. Cheese.
he was a representative for a cheese company. And one day, you know, sold some cheese to Spag, and next thing you know, he wanted him to be his sole representative for cheese in the store. And next thing you know, was cheese and dairy and so on. He became known as Charlie Cheddar. So he's still here, very, very nice. Yeah. Another, I think he might have been my father's first full-time employee, Mr. Zona, Al Zona, just passed away, and I felt kind of bad about that. He was a school teacher in town. I remember him from probably the time I was in 4th grade. But anyway, been seeing him over the years, and he told me some things, but I had gotten in touch. He was at it's an assisted living place on West Main Street. Anyway, to see if they would like me to come over and talk, and the person I was talking to said, oh, you know, you have one of Spag's longtime employees, you have badge number 2. And she says, oh, I'm so sorry, he just passed away over the weekend. And she got all emotional. I felt really bad. Anyway.
I have a big area rug that's bound that I bought at Spag's at least 20 20 years ago, and I still have it in my house. It was very unique, and I still have it. Beautiful.
Anybody else have a question or a story?
My nephew got engaged to a Worcester girl. He was not from Worcester, but she knew Spag very well. And he hid the engagement ring somewhere in the paint department.
It's the same person.
Same person, same story, yeah. So he induced her to visit the paint department, poke around, and she discovered this pretty big diamond ring somewhere among the brushes and whatever. They now run a very successful fashion business in New York.
Really?
But she's a Worcester girl, and she knows Spags.
Yes, sir.
Karen Polito is also employed, also worked at Spags. Karen Polito
Yes, I talked to Karen, there's some quotes in there.
spoke highly during the opening.
Yeah. Of course, Judy is her mother, so Spag would be her great uncle?
Yeah.
Yeah, her great uncle. Yeah. Anybody else?
We used to have residents who came over from like mainland China to UMass. And the first place we'd take them was the Spags, and they were just like blown away. How can you fit this many people in the building?
That became a problem at times.
Yeah.
Lori, again, said sometimes they would have to stop people from coming in because they had a certain capacity that they could allow, so they wouldn't get in trouble. And that reminded me of another story, or a couple of stories. When the book first came out, they had a local author event here out in the hallway. And I was there on this side, and somebody over across from me had some books. And I think he probably was a professor, so-and-so at college, and had a bunch of books about psychiatry or something like that. And he came over to me and he said, I'm an immigrant. I came here from, I think he said, Lebanon, years ago. And he said, when I came here, I had a friend that was already here, and he said, I'm going to take you somewhere where you can get whatever you need to furnish your apartment. And he took me to Spags, and I got everything I needed, and that got me all settled, and I'm not going on my career. But I've heard that a couple of times from people that moved to this country. Another story, Papa's Hardware, Freddie Bennett, of Papa's Hardware, who kind of modeled himself after Spag, and he grew up right almost next door. But he said, when I was a kid, his family owned a bakery, the Carol's Bakery, right almost next door. He said, I went out, and back then kids used to thumb. He said, I was going somewhere, so I started thumbing, and this guy picked me up, and he said, oh, I just came here from another country, he said. Where are you going? So he was someplace up the center. And he started going, he said, oh, I'm going to have to let you out right here. He said, well, why? You know, I just picked me up. He says, I've heard about this place, and I'm going in there because I need a lot of things. I just moved here. It was Spags. He said, I had to walk the rest of the way. Anybody else? Yeah.
I think I'm remembering right, maybe not, but when the blue laws changed and stores could open up on Sunday, he was the holdout, right? He would not, because he wanted his employees to have a family day.
That's true. We're not open on Sundays.
Yeah, so.
For a while.
Eventually, he was forced to, because everybody else was open on Sunday.
But-
He did hold out for a long time.
Okay, one of the stories in there is from Judy, and this is his niece, and she was there, and one day she saw him, he was sitting on a stack of rugs, just kind of moving his legs back and forth, he looked upset. So she said, "Uncle, what's wrong?" And he said, "I just found out that we're gonna be open on Sundays." I said, I'm not happy about that. That's always been family day for everybody. And she said, he was very upset about that. Anyway. So, anybody else? All right. I do have some books, if anybody's interested in a book. Kind of true Spag's fashion. The books are free, but the author's signature is $15. The last thing, I do have books, but as you know, at Spag's, there were no bags with Spags, so we do not have any bags. But thank you all for coming. I've enjoyed some of the stories. I also have, there's a couple of the other books I've written. This one in particular, the first book I wrote, it's long out of print. There's only a few copies left. But, a lot about the lake and White City in there. So, thanks again.